What's up, my grindy little grinders? So today we're going to review this video here. Introvert Language Learning, How to Find Your Tribe. Why the hell am I watching this? I got my tribe. It's my Discord, man. That's my tribe. It's my homies. It's where I hang out. So I guess, great video. I'll see you all tomorrow at the same time. Have a great day. Fuckers still here? Oh god, I guess we'll do this. Okay, let's begin.
Are you studying a foreign language but you're an introvert? And it's really not clear how to square the advice you get on here from gregarious YouTubers with...
Gregarious YouTubers. I know this man loves using big words. Don't make me think.
Feeling like you basically do anything to not have to go talk to a bunch of strangers in a foreign language.
Okay, I gotta point this out because, like, I don't know if this is a me issue, but every time I watch Language Jones, and I haven't watched that much of his content, I've done one review and I watched a tiny bit here and there, but he has this habit of, like, staring with dead eyes into the camera, as if, like, he's not happy to be here type of thing. Now, I don't know if that's, like, what's actually going on behind the scenes, but that's just, like, my observation.
In an unstructured way. I've been making a lot of language learning content lately, and I've started to get the same question enough that I realize it's time to make a video about it. That question is always some variation of, how should I set about learning a language as an introvert? Now, without getting too far ahead of myself, I identify as an introvert.
I identify as an introvert. Okay, I've never heard anyone say I identify as an introvert. It's generally along the lines of I am an introvert.
Yes, I'm gregarious and outgoing, and I have a channel where I talk to hundreds of thousands of people, but going by some...
Well, that's actually not that strange. In fact, the vast majority of YouTubers probably are introverts. I remember I've watched... I've seen plenty of videos where YouTubers talk about their experiences and how they got into YouTubing, and they will actually talk about the fact that originally they were an introvert and this was kind of their way of, like, opening up and, you know, trying to speak to the world type of thing. But what ends up actually happening is, you know, it doesn't really change too much because it's just a camera, and then there's just, like, people on the internet, and, like, you know, like, I talk to the camera and, like, see these comments at the end of the day, and it kind of makes me feel like I'm becoming more outgoing, but realistically I'm not. I'm just a sad husk of a man who just sits here late at night responding to comments thinking he's got friends.
Some definitions of introversion, which I'll get to later in the video, none of that matters. The fact that I find all of that terribly exhausting rather than recharging and rejuvenating is part of it. So,
you know, I'm going to come in here with a little bit of a hot take, and I've said this one a few times on this channel, but if you are an introvert, you can become a chameleon. You can, like, take on the persona of an extrovert. Now, this is not going to be something that can completely change you as a person, although I think it kind of can, at least in 99% of situations. So, for example, when I was younger, I was, without a doubt, an introvert. I was the type of person who would, like, sit near the teacher in class, and then I wouldn't talk to anyone, and I'd quickly run out type of thing because, you know, I was scared of, like, communicating with other people type of thing. And I would just avoid all of these, like, human-based interactions. And I actually was well aware of this, and it was one of the reasons why I joined the military, is because I wanted to open myself up and become less of a hermit, I guess, in this type of way. And that really did teach me, you know, when you're in the military, you don't have much of an option in that. I'm just seeing this sticking out in the camera, and it's, like, starting to piss me off right now. Let me just shove this shit right up in here. Okay, so, like, that really changed me in a lot of ways. But then after I left the military, I went into theater training, and then even more, I was forced to become more outgoing because, like, actors, by and large, are more, like, outgoing type of people, which is interesting when you think about, like, YouTubers are more introvert, actors overall are more, like, outgoing, although you do get introvert actors, just not as many. So you can kind of retrain yourself to adapt to these different situations and not feel that, like, really need to be within your room. But if given the option, I prefer to be here alone without other human interaction. However, I can, like a chameleon, step out and go do whatever I need to do without any issue at all, and even become the life of the party if I want to, because it is something you can learn and train yourself in.
I feel you. So today I'm going to discuss just that, how to stop feeling awkward and how to learn a language as an introvert. And no, the answer is not just change who you are. New language, new personality, Linda. So Spanish Linda is fiery and outgoing.
Okay, I love it. That's a good joke.
Nor is it learn Japanese and become an otaku. If you're new to the channel, I'm Dr. Taylor Jones. I've got,
or as we would say in Chinese, 宅男.
a PhD in linguistics from the University of Pennsylvania. And I love languages, linguistics.
Yeah, I know. You've got a PhD. Everyone knows you got a PhD, my man.
And language learning. Today I'm talking to all the introverts as much as they'd probably prefer I didn't. This is Language Jones. I don't take a lot of sponsors, and the ones I do, I use and...
Oh, God. Do we have to start with a sponsor?
I like. And today's video is sponsored by LingoPie. LingoPie is a video on demand.
LingoPie. These guys have reached out to me at least twice before. I might accidentally...
accelerating your learning with music, which definitely helps with memory, while gaining fluency with slang and idioms and keeping on top of what's hot among speakers of your target language.
Look, he gets paid by LingoPie. I don't. But, like, if you want to support him, go get LingoPie via his links in his description. Okay? Cool. I said it. Support him by buying LingoPie stuff.
When I did a teeny tiny modicum of research for this video, since that's what this channel was all about after all, I was shocked. Mostly because there's so much disagreement about introversion, but also there's some personalities in psychology who are kind of horrifying. I don't mean personality types like narcissist, I mean specific people. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First thing, as usual, is that we should really define the parameters of what we're talking about. To my mind, introversion gets used to describe three distinct phenomena.
Okay, let's hear it. I'm very curious, actually.
There's introversion in the psychological sense, which is somewhat contested, but we can take a stab at a sort of rough definition. There's shyness, which is different, and there's anxiety, which is its own other thing. These will all basically need slightly different approaches. It's not one size fits all. Otherwise, you all wouldn't be asking this, because the advice would just be, just don't be an introvert. So introversion, it turns out, is another one of those Jungian things related to archetypes and shit. It was most widely popularized by the debunked and invalid MBTI, the Mega Big Texas Instruments.
Oh, I had one of those when I was in school. Did you guys have one of those, I just called them like, what were they? They're not like calculator, but they're like a maths calculator. But anyway, we managed to install Snake on ours in high school.
The Myers-Briggs type indicator, and by a literal Nazi who, when he died, had 87 papers retracted over things like, and I quote, concocting data. His other paper...
And you know what the funny thing is? This is still highly common in science. Not the Nazi thing, but like bullshit papers. There is channels that I follow here on YouTube, which are basically do what I do, but in the science community, where they literally are debunking science papers like constantly over and over and over. And there was like this really big one that happened over in America recently in the psychology world, where some woman who worked at Harvard, basically she was brought down, and she was like a leader in her field. She was brought down because she was faking data.
Papers were about exactly what you'd expect, racial differences in IQ. The history of psychology is so disappointing that it makes linguists feel slightly better about our own stupid field. Anyway, all of that is to say, take it with a huge grain of salt. But the idea is that introverts can be gregarious and outgoing and approachable and energetic, but they feel best and recharge best when they're in their fortress of solitude. And like, sure, okay. I know some theater people who feel like shit when you leave them alone because they start to wonder if they even exist.
You gonna have a go at theater people, my man?
And then they just turn on when around other people. So I'm willing to entertain the idea that some people really get energized and recharged by social interaction.
This is an interesting one, because realistically, I'm pretty sure for most people, no matter if you classify yourself as an introvert or whatever, after a long social interaction, you know, maybe you've gone to a party or whatever, you will probably feel tired afterwards. You won't feel like energized. And the only few cases I can think of, like when I would feel highly energized, might be if something as a result of that interaction came into existence, which I was really excited about. Maybe some plans for something, or maybe some new project or something like that. That's when I'll feel energized. But if it's just like a general discussion, you know, I go with mates down to the pub, we have a chat, whatever. Afterwards, I'll feel a bit tired, but like, I'm pretty sure it's because I just drank too much.
But also, a lot of the recent studies on introversion find that it's less who you are and how you feel and more what you do, and that everybody runs a full spectrum of extroverted and introverted behaviors. So
that sounds more realistic to me.
So it's just your balance and preferences, and those can change. Fine. Already, this alone...
Yeah, I believe the newest studies on this. That sounds so much more realistic.
...can have implications for language learning approaches. But let's meet the other two contestants. Shyness is not the preference for quiet and minimally
Shyness, you can train yourself out of. Easily can train yourself out of.
...stimulating environments, at least not for their own sake. Rather, it's a fear of negative judgment. In fact, some psychologists map these as literally orthogonal to each other. God, I love academic speak.
Yeah, the way you train yourself out of this is by putting yourself in judgmental situations. So, for example, if you're scared of people judging you for your speaking capabilities, get up on stage and speak, and do it enough, and eventually you will not be worried about this anymore.
So there are two dimensions at 90 degrees. So you can be extroverted and shy. That's where you want to spend time with people and you get a lot of good from it, but you're anxious and afraid that they won't accept you, you won't fit in, you'll make a mistake.
I see the problem with all these catchwords like introversion and all this stuff is that they're just catchwords. They don't really mean anything. What you should do, like we're getting into self-improvement right now. This is not really languages anymore, but like if you want to go down the self-improvement path, do an analysis of yourself, break yourself down, do some questioning, okay? Like sit down and go, okay, what is the problem that I'm trying to deal with right now? If my problem is that, like, why do you even want to go outside and interact with people first would be the question. But let's say it's public speaking. Now, once you know you want to be able to do this and you're terrified of the idea, then do some research on it. Actually, like, watch videos on how to do it. Talk to people who know how to do it, and then force yourself into that situation. It's the same thing with languages. You just have to go through the hard yards to get to the profit at the end. And once you know that there's going to be suffering along the way, eventually you will get to your goal as long as you accept that suffering. The idea that you can get through life in any field, any hobby, pretty much anything without some form of suffering is just stupid.
Stake, etc. And you can be introverted and stable. That's the technical term they use. Comfortable in yourself, but just, a loner. And lastly, we have...
That's probably me, I guess. I'm comfortable in myself and I prefer to be alone, but still, I can go out and become the life of the party if I want.
Anxiety. We all do now. But also, I just meant like as the third part of my list. I was maybe too strong with my terminology before. Shyness is feeling reserved and uncomfortable. Anxiety is much more powerful and is considered a clinical disorder. So social anxiety will be things like intense fear of interacting with others, replaying interactions over and over again.
Yeah, well, once it gets into the psychology of, having medical conditions and stuff, obviously all of what I'm saying goes out the window if you've actually got some type of medical condition.
After the fact, expecting the worst possible social situation to occur, avoiding new situations or even common everyday experiences that require social interaction. It's not, I just don't have the energy to deal with people today. It's abject terror at the thought of people having to deal with you.
Yeah, well, if you're in that situation, you should probably seek out some form of help.
Good a place as any for a disclaimer that while I am a doctor, I'm not that kind of doctor. And more importantly, if you're experiencing what you think may be consistent with social anxiety or any other anxiety disorder, you should seek out information on it from a qualified professional. I'm led to understand that help exists and treatment is available. And for those with actual anxiety...
I think he just took a pot shot at BetterHelp then.
That's the real advice. Modifying your language learning routine can help with that one aspect of it, but that's not treating the root cause. So with those introduced, let's talk about tailoring a language learning routine to your needs. If you have social anxiety, then advice like taking classes with people, going out on the street and talking to randos and getting feedback, language exchanges, these are somewhere between absolutely mortifying and panic-inducing. So don't do them. You don't have to become a historical linguist, but I do know more than one with anxiety disorders, and as horrifying as the content of the tablets is, Ugaritic tablets don't judge you. Papyri can't hurt your feelings, and the scribes who wrote them are long dead, we think. Maybe don't read any incantations aloud.
Okay, you're just rambling on now. Come on, get to the point.
And leave me a comment if you've ever accidentally or intentionally summoned shades, apparitions, or ghouls. But the point is, you can also enjoy...
I'm pretty sure if you've summoned shades, apparitions, or ghouls, you would not be here to tell you.
Language learning, just for the structure and sounds and so on, without it having to be the same as what other people do. This is where I like apps and books and TV and podcasts and so on, where you don't really have to interact with people, but you can still hear the language and practice the language. Now, if you want to actually go out and talk to people, that's something where I recommend figuring out what social situations you'll be in and learning the shit out of them. This goes for you shy folks too. One of my guilty pleasures is watching YouTube videos from people who claim to have been spies or people who claim they're going to make you more charismatic or whatever. Bear with me on this one. They're often nonsense and more often than not, totally blind to culture. But everybody's favorite ex-CIA guy had something that stuck with me, which was that he claimed that you can just prepare for conversations and map them out. You know what you're likely to be asked. You can figure out the next steps if the other person is more or less on.
I'm pretty sure anyone who considers himself an introvert has been in this situation where they go to pick up a phone, they know they need to make a phone call, and then they sit there running through the scenario of every single direction this phone call is going to go. What questions they're going to ask me, what paperwork they're going to ask. Are they going to ask about some specific, esoteric detail from my past, which I'm not going to remember in the moment? And oh my god, what the fuck am I going to do? I'm going to explode. They're going to find me out as, the freaking fraud I am. Everyone's been down that route, I'm pretty sure, if they're an introvert. So, mapping out and planning stuff that you don't need to speak to the CEI to figure that one out. If you're an introvert, you've already thought that one out.
On autopilot for both a yes or a no or whatever the alternatives are, and you can just map out the whole thing. It's a decision tree. His whole thing was about spending time planning for the unusual, but for those with anxiety or even just shyness, you can game plan a conversation. It's fine. And it's surprisingly effective for most interactions. In
fact, game planning a conversation is literally what most of those people who go out on the street doing street polyglot videos do. We know the ones we're talking about.
Language learning, the additional piece everyone needs is a few fixed phrases for getting yourself out of trouble. Things like, I'm sorry, I don't know the word in Italian for this. I mentioned elsewhere the game of describing things and ideas in your target language at your level as you learn them. That's also...
Okay, so he's talking about like using words and phrases to like escape from a conversation. And by the way, put in the comment section below, what is your preferred method to get out of a conversation you don't want to be in anymore? Okay, now I want to talk about this a little bit because I've noticed a common occurrence with my wife every time she leaves a job. So most normal humans, when they want to quit a job, they put in like their they put in their resignation letter and they'll say, oh, I'm leaving. And then the boss will try to negotiate with them and try and, do money and stuff like that and be like, oh, you can't go, we don't have people to cover you. Why the fuck did you not think about that beforehand? But anyway, she doesn't go through any of that. She literally just says, we're moving to Tasmania. Richard's family is severely ill and I need to support him in this endeavor. And then they'll be like, oh, okay. And they won't ask anything anymore. And she's done it like 5 times now. Like, I'm serious. We've moved to Tasmania like 5 times apparently. Eventually, someone's going to be like, didn't you use that one before?
Practice for not having the right word at the right time. For shyness, as opposed to actual anxiety, I would recommend exposure and practice, but do so in a structured way. That's your lessons on online platforms with real people, but you can sign out at any time, and it's a more structured conversation. But signing out, you lose the money, so you actually have an incentive to be there. But that's...
Like, if you're so terrified of talking to, like, people, and you're scared about this, just join, like, for example, my Discord, and chat in the group, and if you don't like what the conversation, and chat, I mean, like, use texts and stuff, text messages and stuff, and if you don't like it, just disappear from the conversation. Like, no one's going to care. Or you could jump into a voice channel, and if you're in a conversation and you're not happy about it anymore, just say, oh, I've got to go, I just found out I had cancer. And, just make up some bullshit excuse. No one cares.
That's only if you need to develop the ability to speak and listen in real time in your target language. If you don't have to do language exchanges. And if you decide to do them, I'd recommend planning it out. You can ask for what you want to talk about or study, and you can prepare it in advance. It gets rid of a few degrees of freedom for the unknown. For introverts, it's a little different. I definitely encourage all of the above, plus going out and having those... I'm
going to be completely honest. We're like 10 minutes into this video, and I actually don't know what the point of this video is. Because everything he's saying is directed towards introverts. But being someone who is an introvert, okay, all of everything he's saying is completely obvious. Like, we've gone through this. We've mapped out conversations. Like, we know that. We have our paths to escape from scenarios we don't want to be in. So you haven't actually given us any, anything for how to find our tribe.
Unstructured interactions with people, but build in recharging. One of my favorite things to do when traveling is to go to museums at off hours. One of my absolute favorite memories from when I was studying Dutch a little more intensively was when I went to the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam at 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning. I walked there through a largely empty city, had a short conversation with the barista when I got my morning coffee, skimmed some of the papers and magazines that were left out.
This is one of the reasons why I like to go to cinemas by myself. So I will often go to cinemas at the end of a movie run by myself. One, because there's going to be basically no one in there because cinemas already at the moment are dying in Australia. So there'll be pretty much no one in there. I get the whole cinema to myself. And 2, I can just walk up to the machine, buy the ticket, don't have to interact with anyone. And then I know no one's going to hassle me for the next few hours and I can just sit there in peace and be alone. In fact, I'm pretty sure automation like self-checkout, the McDonald's self-purchase, all this type of stuff has been like the biggest blessing in history for introverts.
And got to the museum just before opening when there was practically nobody there. I spent most of the morning looking at the artwork and reading about it in Dutch. I had 6 hours of passive learning with probably 15 total minutes of interaction with people. And that conversation with the barista, you better believe I went in with a plan and directed the conversation. For any of the 3, the big questions to ask yourself are first, whether you know what your needs are, and second, whether your language learning is aligned with them. For the true introverts, it may just be having quiet time between bouts of extreme levels of social interaction by the other 2 standards. For the shy, it might be giving yourself space to be shy, but also putting yourself in positions where you can grow socially in your target language, but with guardrails, bowling bumpers, water wings, training wheels. For those with anxiety, that might be a terrible plan. I don't know, I'm not that kind of doctor. For all of the 3, here are some suggestions for language learning that don't involve too much social interaction or...
Okay, so freaking 11 minutes.
Or the threat of judgment. But this is important. Part of how we learn is allowing ourselves the grace to forget things and to get things wrong. And the act of being reminded or being corrected actually helps us learn, which sucks because these are things we often avoid in our first language. So now I have to be forgetful and incorrect in another language. So here's some options.
I'm guessing that was just badly worded because obviously we don't go out there and purposely forget stuff.
If you're not already, you should be doing things like studying with a course, whether it's a textbook or an app or whatever it is. I use Anki to memorize things as well. If you're self-directed and you're just sentence mining or creating an Anki deck with vocabulary and grammar from your favorite podcast or TV show, that's fine too, but you're probably not asking for advice here. Free writing has been shown to be very effective because you'll realize you don't know how to say what you want to say. And in theory,
you're just listing language learning methods at the moment.
Either come up with a different way of saying it, or you look it up and you learn that. So journaling basically works, but you have to go back and correct errors. If you can tolerate having somebody do so for you, that can be over email even. And of course, that's out if you're just learning Latin so you can read Seneca or something. So basically, for learning new vocabulary and grammar, all of the tips and tricks that I mentioned in my video on Fluent Forever will work. But if you want to generate the language, whether written or spoken, and especially if you want to be able to listen to spoken and respond in real time, that's a skill that requires practice and, frankly, being bad at first. So the bottom line for all of this is to go easy on yourself while doing things that will get you to your goal. So that means the going easy on yourself doesn't mean just never studying, but it does mean not beating yourself up about it. And since we're the center of our own stories...
So basically, so far the recommendation is that just do a whole heap of self-study by yourself, and then just accept the fact that you're going to make mistakes, okay?
It can be easy to feel like we're the center of other people's stories too. But for the shy ones out there, I don't know if this makes it better or worse, but you're not. Whatever social faux pas you're worried about, nobody's going to care. And if they do...
That is true.
And it was something actually minor, that's a them problem. For the introverts, get some quiet time, get some space, get some rest. And we've already established that actual anxiety is above my pay grade, but definitely seek professional care and guidance. It's there and it helps. I really wish I had more of a magic bullet for all of you, but the science of learning is pretty clear. It's a question of having the most effective encoding that you can muster at the time of learning, or encoding, and being challenged to retrieve information.
Okay, yeah, that's enough of this video. Okay, this video actually pisses me off, in all honesty, because it's called How to Find Your Tribe, but we did not do any tribe hunting. Okay, so this is realistically how I would find my tribe as an introvert, because it's hard for me to say whether I'm still an introvert anymore, and some people are going to say, well, you can never, like, not be one. You're either one or the other, but, like, as the science literally said there in the middle, which was probably the only good part of this video, I reckon, is that people are on a spectrum for basically a bunch of different things, and some things you're more comfortable with and some things you're not. And realistically, you can train yourself in most scenarios, unless it's like an actual medical condition, as mentioned. So, if you do want to find your tribe, all you got to do is join one, like, for example, my Discord, and just sit there in the darkness. Like, you know that scene from Lord of the Rings, how they go into the pub and there's like, everyone's like smoking and laughing, and then you got the one guy sitting in the corner, he's like, and he's just like watching everyone. You can do that. Just join the Discord, sit there in the corner in the darkness watching. And then when you feel comfortable, just throw a couple of words out. And if you stop talking, no one cares, realistically, because they will just assume that something happened. Maybe your baby started crying or you had to go to school, whatever. No one will care that your presence is not there. And if someone does actually care enough, they start pinging you, that probably means they probably care about you in some way. But even then, you can still just wait a day, because who knows, maybe you're in bed. That happens, okay? So you could join the Discord, or you could join some Telegram groups, you could join whatever groups, and then eventually what will happen is there will be voice chats. You can jump into the voice chat and you can literally type in the comment section, oh, sorry guys, I can't talk because my mic's broken. Just lie, okay? And they'll be fine. Just say, I'm just here to listen. And just listen like that. And then when you do feel comfortable, you can turn on your mic and like just say, look guys, you can literally lead into the conversation and say, look guys, I've only got a couple of minutes before I got to get to work, even if that's not true. And just throw out a couple of phrases, practice a little bit, and then once you're not feeling comfortable anymore, just ditch that shit. No one cares, okay? So that would be how I would find my tribe, because, well, that's what I used to do, and nowadays I built my tribe. So that's what I like to do. Pretty much that's it. Overall, I don't think this was a very good video. It was like 14 minutes of rambling, and most of it could be like actually discussed in about 2 minutes. Now, I get it. On YouTube, you want to stretch out the videos, because if a video is under, I think, 8 or 10 minutes, I can't remember. If it's under that, you can't have ads in the middle of the video. But if you stretch it beyond that, then you can put ads, as many ads as you want in the middle of the video. So YouTubers need to talk for longer. And luckily, I'm just blessed with the divine benefit of being able to ramble for hours, and people for some reason just listen to me. That's pretty much it. I'll see you all in the next video. And if you're not there, well, my man, being an introvert is the last thing you got to worry about, because I'm going to find your ass. Don't know why I do it like that. I'm going to find your ass.